Well, I think that it's important for filmmakers to do different types of things. Going from Desires of the Heart to doing a few things about cancer, I'm shifting between a film that was shot on 2 continents with hundreds of people, with various challenges, to this very simple character-driven documentary that has a bare-bones crew of no more than 5 people at any given time. It enables you to stay fresh. It enables you to constantly be reevaluating the resources that you actually need. It constantly makes you think about the challenges of telling different types of stories, so that when you shift back into a higher budget mode, you have a new set of tools that you maybe didn't have before. And I think that's not unprecedented for sure. There are many filmmakers like Jonathan Demme, Sidney Lumet, and people that I very much appreciate and look up to that have done that throughout their careers. So if I'm able to keep shifting between narrative films and documentary films, I plan to continue to do it.
Speaking of Sidney Lumet, what does the movie Network mean to you?
Network is my #1 favorite film of all time. I think it's brilliant. Paddy Chayefsky's screenplay, I mean, that's one of the most prophetic pieces of writing ever written.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Specifically with Sidney Lumet, I'll talk about this for just a second. The thing that made him so brilliant as a filmmaker is that when he first started out, he worked with lenses. I don't know if you know this, but he would work with a prime lens, a whole set of prime sets when he was doing live television in the 40s and 50s. So if they needed, a 55 or a 90 or a 35 or whatever it is, he would have to know so quickly what lens they needed that you wouldn't have time to think about it. So he understood when he was framing a scene or when he was shooting a scene how to block it in a way for specific lenses to best tell the story because of this background knowledge that he had in the back of his head. And for me, I've actually, with my things I do outside of directing film, if I'm doing ad campaigns or a corporate project or whatever it is, I've actually come to switch to nothing but prime lenses myself. I don't own any more zoom lenses. That's for that very reason, because it gives you this whole set of visual tools, so when you're making something, you already have this idea about exactly what you're going to get with each type of lens. And Network is a really good example of why that works.
What do you think of this bad boy?
It's great. I won't judge you for it.
So there's a lot of people, in this town that are struggling hard, trying to make it, trying to make their movie, trying to make their vision, and the years are turning into decades, and we see a guy like you and we think, what the hell does this kid have that I don't?
Well, I don't know if I have anything that someone else doesn't. I think that everyone has the capacity to do the things they want if they work hard enough for it. I think that a lot of it has to do with being in the right place at the right time. It has a lot to do with how passionately you pursue something. It may be that you have a screenplay or a project that you've been developing for a while. Maybe it's not moving forward. Well, what else do you have? You can't pin your whole career on one project. You have to constantly be reevaluating what is right for the right time. When I made Followed, the zombie film, that was really at the height of when zombie projects were popular. That was a good time to make it. That was a time I could go get money to go make that film. I think as a filmmaker, you've got to identify what is the right project for the right moment and the experiences that you've had previous to where you are now. So you've got to figure out, how can I make the projects I want to make with the resources that I have available at the place I'm at in my career? If you're trying to make something that you're not prepared to make, no one's going to give you the opportunity to make that film. You've really got to think about what your capacity is.
Can you specify that within your career?
Sure.
You did with you made the zombie film at the right time, but how did you get to this point now? You're getting asked to do feature films.
Well, I think that for me it's, I know this may not be the answer people like to hear, but it really is a lot of hard work. It's patience. Films don't come together instantaneously. Films sometimes are a slow process. And so what you've got to figure out as you're developing projects, you've got to make something that people like. Let's start with that. If you've made a film that no one watches, no one writes about, no one interviews you for, no one knows that you've made the film. So you need to start with that. You need to get some press around it. You need to be able to do things to enable people to know that it exists. And hopefully, once people know it exists, hopefully they like it. Because if they don't like it, it's going to be more challenging for you to make the next film. So once they like your film, let's assume that they do, then you have to be able to say, well, what's next? Because people are going to ask you what next thing is. And if you can't answer that question with 3 or 4 projects, then I think you're not in a very good position, because the person you're talking to, be it a financier, a producer, a studio, a production company, you might have 3 or 4 projects on deck. They may only like one of them. And if you can only say there's one project you're ready to do, or you have no idea what you want to do next with your career, they're not going to take you very seriously, because they don't see you as someone that has longevity and that has vision. And so I think that the answer, long and short, to that is you've got to work hard, you've got to have several things in your back pocket, and you've got to be ready and prepared to talk about all of them.
Jumping back a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little hole in the whole making a movie, getting money. For you specifically, where do you look for money, if you don't mind talking
Sure.
about that?
Where do I look for money? There's all kinds of places that money exists. You know, there's trillions of dollars floating around in the universe. It's just a question of if you can grab it. And so I think that when you're looking at films, the key to financing is really identifying who is the right person for the right film. It's just as much as I was saying earlier that you have to, when you're identifying a screenplay or a project for a production company or a producer, is it the right fit? You know, I'm not going to go take to Steven Spielberg a little indie character drama, because he's probably not going to make that film. He's probably going to make something that's got, you know, bigger scope and scale to it. So you've really got to understand who your right audience is. And it's the same thing with investors. If it's someone that's interested in zombie films, or if it's someone that has a cultural element, or if maybe it's even someone that's never done a film before and is just intrigued, what is it that they find interesting about film? There is no magic wand to finding an investor. Each project is different, and each investor is different. And so you have to be able to satisfy various demands and various needs that the investor has. So I would say that with each film, what you really should do, especially if you're an independent filmmaker just starting out, go talk to dentists. Go talk to people that have disposable income in your community where you can find some money. And you don't have to have a big budget. You just need to have a manageable budget. You live in the era of iPhones where you can shoot, you know, 2K with certain apps. You don't have to go have the best equipment. You just have to be able to tell a good story.
I guess, hey, I learned a lot from this talk. And is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of film, your career, your 2 films out now, the film's coming up, the book coming up, or what's in the future for you?
Well, I've been very fortunate. At the end of the day, you know, I think that if I'm successful in my career, that I want to just be able to make the projects that I want to make. And it could be a book about a legendary publicist or a football coach, or an international film about identity and culture, or even a small documentary about a friend that struggles with cancer. I think for me, storytelling is really about finding things that appeal to my experiences in life, and many of which have dealt with themes of loss and identity, because you know, my dad died when I was 13. He had one of the first U.S. cases of SARS. I lost my grandparents to Alzheimer's and to blindness, and I've always been drawn to things that tackle those themes. And for me, if I can continue to tell those kind of stories, if I can be able to find things that I think will resonate with an audience, then that's where I want to be. And thus far, I've been very fortunate to do that.
James, it's a pleasure talking to you. I look forward to all the things you do in the future. And hey, till next time.
Thank you so much.
So a little birdie told me that this is based on a true story that maybe you heard on an NPR.
Yes.
And I'm really curious about that, because that must be fascinating.
Yeah, you can actually look it up. Man who really falls in love with balloons, and his balloons are really big too, and he loves them, and he rubs them, and he holds them, and